All right, baby. Today is Tuesday, January 12th. Welcome to the Dog Walk, presented by Barstool Sports. Chief, you're here. How we doing?
Doing pretty well, all things considered. You know, we're moving on from the Bears. We're moving on to something else depressing. So,
yeah. Would you say it's depressing or mysterious today? Or all of the above?
Both. I mean, it depressed the fuck out of me, just reading through the articles and watching the videos on multiple levels. So, yeah, I would say it's depressing when you read about people who are living a lifestyle that is like destitute. Like it's sad that people live like this in America.
Yeah, and if you read the topic in the description of the Apple iPod app or whatever you're listening on, you see we're going to be talking about Oniontown, New York.
Yep.
Which I didn't know existed. Our producer Tom, he alerted us like, "Yo, you guys should do Oniontown." I was like, "Oniontown?
Yeah.
What's that? Like, this is the number one producer of onions? Like, you know what I mean? I don't know what the fuck Oniontown is."
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it either. Tom is from New York. Oniontown is in New York, so that was why he had heard of it. Maybe it's just more like prominent in like the culture and pop culture, talking about Oniontown when it's, you know, if you're from New York City, this is about 100 miles north, like directly north in up the Hudson Valley there. So that's maybe there's a couple of Midwestern guys we haven't come across it, but you know, I was thinking like, oh yeah, Oniontown, like a, you know, kind of a obscure community. This will tie in nicely, you know, on the backs of doing the Amish. Like, wrong. It's the opposite of that. So the Amish have some depressing things about them in some ways. The entire thing about Oniontown is a bummer for me.
All right, then let's get into it. Where do we begin here?
Well, I think, you know, the location. So we covered that. It's not even really a town. You know, like there's no like police, there's no municipality. Like it's just one road that leads kind of up this mountain. And when I say one road, it's like a dirt road with a dead end. And so it's just this section of this area called Dover in upstate New York. And there's some surrounding areas, like Poughkeepsie is probably the closest like real place, like real town.
Notable place?
Yeah, like and I feel like most people have heard of Poughkeepsie. You just like the word Poughkeepsie is what we were talking about before the show. So I feel like most people have heard of that. And it's just, you know, this is Appalachia, like the northern part of the Appalachian Mountains, and people get dug in. And I think this is, in my head, places like this are more common than people like to admit. But basically, yeah, it's just a one little dirt road community where the people, like I said, are dug in, and there's been like some pop culture-y things like The Hills Have Eyes, or, you know, kind of loosely connected to that. And there's just been other things where it's like they're talking about these people, like these hill people, and they just live there forever in this kind of destitute, sad life. And it's been that way for basically forever.
What do you exactly mean by they're what did you say, Appalachia? There's
Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah,
so
but
like,
what do you mean? But they're bogged in there. Sorry, I forgot. I'm blanking on the word you just used. But
they're
just said
dug in.
Yeah, dug in. Sorry,
Yeah.
that's what I want to get to. It's Appalachia. They're dug in. What do you exactly mean by that?
So like this is, if you kind of do, you know, Appalachian Mountains stretch from Maine all the way down to Georgia. So they form almost kind of like a western border of the 13 colonies. And if you talk about like coal country in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and you think about the types of people that live there, same thing like Western Massachusetts and the Berkshires, you get a lot of these towns that were, you know, some of them were like farming communities a long time ago. Other ones were coal country. Other ones were part of like, you know, the early industrial age Rust Belt, where they had textile mills and things like that. And a lot of those jobs just kind of dried up. And those communities died, and some of the people stayed, and there's just, you know, they don't get any coverage, they don't get any real support, and they're just living in a way in America that it would be unrecognizable to you and I. And, you know, they got, you know, a lot of teen pregnancies, a lot of drug use, a lot of I mean, there's all sorts of things. Like, you know, when I say teen pregnancies, one of the rumors, or not even a rumor, but they built a Planned Parenthood near this Oniontown because they were having such high rates of 12 and 13, 14-year-old girls getting pregnant. So it's like they needed resources specifically for this area. And so that's what I mean, where it's just depressing, and like nobody really leaves. It's almost like that, you've seen the True Detective season 1.
Yeah.
Where McConaughey, they're driving around these areas and they got like trash and like old dryers and shit in the front yard and trailers everywhere. And he's just like, man, there's all kinds of ghettos in the world. And this is a ghetto. Like this Oniontown, it sounds like a ghetto.
But what I'm confused here is does the population match what we're dealing with here? Because it's a dirt road, like you said.
Yeah.
When
Like
you
how
watch
many
videos,
people
I'm like,
are in
yeah,
there?
how many people, give or take, are there?
I don't know, man. I mean, if you watch the videos, a few thousand. Like I was reading articles and if you go to the Wikipedia page for Oniontown,
there's not much.
It's like a paragraph. It's a road and community in Dutchess County, New York, a mile and a half south of Dover Plains in the town of Dover, and partially known for the historically off-putting demeanor of its residents towards outsiders. And like that's it. Like that's the only thing they really have to talk about. Like they don't give like this population. They're not doing a census because nobody goes in there. So and that's kind of how it became prominent. And my point about they're dug in, I kind of get the sense that there's, I don't know, hundreds, maybe more of these similar type communities where people just live and they're, they don't even know like the outside world exists.
And they're just unaccounted for in America's population?
Yeah, I don't think they're doing all this.
Well, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
When you really do your research and you kind of look shit up. Number one, it was hard for me to find a lot of information.
Hardly anything.
Period.
There's one article in Vice called "Peeling Oniontown." It was written in 2012. Then there was these videos, and we should talk about those too, that were being published on YouTube in like 2008, 2009. And then there was an article in like between 2009 and 1947, when a guy wrote a series of 3 articles, there was nothing. And then the next most prominent article mentioning them was from 1908. So it's just like no one goes in there, and it just becomes like urban legend and myth and things like that. And then, the police don't really go in there except to do drug raids. And there's a Netflix documentary called Humboldt County. I can't remember what it was called, but something about Humboldt County, California, which all they do in Humboldt County is grow weed. Like that, so they grow weed like illegally. Like nobody really has a license, and people are just up there in the woods, like just growing and selling and buying and running across state lines, and that's kind of how they make their living. And it sounds like there's a lot of that going on in this Oniontown too.
Okay. Dug in. That was so interesting to me. He kept saying that. Dug in. What the fuck does he mean?
Yeah, I just mean like people, they have their way of life, and they don't even think that it's possible to get out of it.
Yeah.
So they're just dug in. Like, you know your neighbors, your family, and those are the only people you really know. You go to the local school, but they have an incredibly high dropout rate. They said like most people, like the overwhelming majority, don't graduate high school. And I know people in my family come from a town in Texas where the high school graduation rate, high school graduation, 13%.
Not good.
Not good. Okay, so that's in Texas. I can't even fucking imagine what it is in Oniontown. I mean, 13% might be high for Oniontown. 13% might be 8th grade graduation, and that's what I mean with these people. These people are just dug in, and it reminded me, like reading about this place, because you're in the Appalachian Mountains, and this town specifically, this community specifically, Oniontown, is up the side of this mountain in upstate New York. And when we did the Who Really Discovered America podcast about, there's a woman in that documentary who said, oceans historically are a highway. Boats can zip across. If you look at like the Rome and Greece and all these places in the ancient world, Egypt is on the Nile, and the pyramids are up in in Giza and all that. And then New York City, like all these big places are always near a waterway, because waterways are highways. And mountains and forests are a barrier. So they're like a wall. And you have like instances where you have these communities across the world where they're just isolated, either by forests or by mountains. And Appalachia has a lot of that too, where you just can't, no one gets in, no one gets out. And I remember reading something about this. There's a little peninsula in France where like Rennes is. It's like it's like the northwest arm almost of of France and sticks out into the Atlantic Ocean. And then there's this giant forest that blocks off that peninsula. And that forest historically was like deemed haunted and unpenetrable. So the people who are on the outskirts of this, now it's France, they speak French and all that, but culturally, they're much more similar to the Irish than they are to the French, because the Irish are right there. They're a boat ride away. Much easier to go west and onto a boat and do trade with them than try to penetrate that forest and get to Paris. So like mountains they're a barrier, and so that's why it's easy to have this isolation where people are just like, yeah, like this is where we live. Like we don't really have. There was a quote from that. I mentioned those articles from 1947, where it's like the guy wrote 3 articles, and one of them was "Escape from the Atomic Age, a real life Tobacco Road 100 miles from Broadway." So that's like talking about like that's a shot at both Oniontown. But also, they're like, well, these people are Southern, like hick kind of people. That they're 100 miles away from the capital of the world, New York City. You would never know it, and they're living like they're down at Tobacco Road, like that movie Deliverance, where they're backwoods people that just can't or don't want to, probably just can't or aren't aware of like how the outside world lives, and it's probably very intimidating. And they're just going to live in these isolated pockets of mountain community that are just festered with drugs, and they have drug trade. They like raise their own pigs and things like that. They feed the pigs trash, which is like a common thing historically, but like food scraps, and like that's how they keep the pigs alive. Then you kill the pigs and you just keep the circle going. But there's like it's no traffic lights, one road, and that one dirt road has like a big cattle fence that has like, hey, like no trespassing signs. And people in 2008 and 2009 started to break that no trespassing sign. And they're like, kids from the surrounding area being like, they're making videos like called Adventures in Oniontown. And they would drive up there with their camcorders or cameras on their phones, early smartphones, and take these videos. And they would look like Blair Witchy. And the first ones went up, and they kind of got out of there, but the video went viral. And then more and more people started doing it. And then the people of Oniontown were like, hey, fuck these people. And they would close the gate behind them. They would try to run them off the road with their own cars. They'd throw bricks and rocks and things at the cars. And there's instances where they drag people out of the cars and like beat the shit out of them. And it's like, wow, like that's fucking scary. I would never go to Oniontown, not in a million billion years. But what kind of asshole drives around a community trying to like get a reaction out of people and making fun of how they live and where they live and all sorts of things like that? Imagine if someone was doing that in Hiawatha Park. Like, how would people react to that?
Well, listen, of course, I think there's a difference, though, between curiosity and being a dick. Sure.
Right.
Okay.
So
that's... I'll be straight up with you. Mm-hmm. Like, I would be interested to drive down that road.
Sure, we're talking about it on this podcast. Yes. Like, we're interested, and that's the same thing with this guy who wrote the article in Vice in 2012. Like, he got in. Like, he kind of, friend of a friend, like, got clearance to go in, goes in one day, knocks on the door, say, hey, I'm looking for this woman named Ethel, who is deemed like she's like the matriarch of Oniontown. And this kid comes out, flat brim hat, being like, Ethel doesn't want to talk, get the fuck out of here, and slam the door. Ooh. So he goes back the next day, and like he finally kind of like infiltrates and meets these people, and it's like, so he starts talking to him, and it's like, yeah, like there's like so and so's arrested, 17. They're talking to a woman who's like 45, but she's got a 19-year-old granddaughter, so kind of do the math on that. Not the best situation. 17-year-old grandson's in jail for burglary. The daughter was in jail, so the mother of this 19-year-old and the son, who's 17, is in jail. She's in jail for burglary too. The mother is. So it's just like, it's just all the worst types of things that people get up to when they're desperate. And these are the and they're stuck in this Appalachia where they're desperate. And then you talk about the term Oniontown, and it's used colloquially by the people who live there too. They're, hey, like, what's going on in OT? Like, they're writing letters from jail. What's going on in OT? Any drama? Like, fuck yeah, there's drama. There's police going by, like, doing drug raids and things like that. And there's meth, there's heroin, there's all sorts of things. And it's just people just trying to get by. But then they just never leave. So it's like a shitty place.
I guess I'm just confused on how people are getting arrested for burglary, so they're obviously leaving the town to go burglarize other places.
Correct.
I would assume that they're they're going to school, right? Like they're going
for a while
to the next town over to school. Yes, for a while.
Yeah,
but
they go to that Dover, which is a mile away.
Okay, so that retracts what I said earlier in the show. Like they are accounted for in some way or another, but
kind of.
Yeah. What do you mean, kind of?
Like, you can't find any population numbers for Oniontown. Like, there's just, and it's like.
But wouldn't they just be numbers for like the broader county that their Oniontown's in?
But like, what makes up the numbers for that broader county? Like people filling out the paperwork.
Yeah.
People aren't filling out paperwork.
Yeah.
And it's like they don't even really. It's like it's hard for them in the article in Vice. It's like it's hard for them to get mail. So they're talking like they got letters from their grandson Jimmy, who's 17 and in jail, and it's like a process to get it. It's like because it's just trailers up there. It's just like people don't even have like real houses, and then you drive up and you have like this one burnt out house, and like it's like how long has that burnt out house been there at the front of where this road leads? Who knows? Who the fuck knows? And and no one even knows where the term Oniontown came from. It's just something that started to be used, and they said there's I guess there was some slang in like the late 1800s, early 1900s that an onion was slang for someone who was uneducated. So we're talking like 120, 150 years ago, people were looking at Oniontown the same way they look at them now. And I mentioned they had that article in 1908. And it was from something from it's like the history of Dover, which is the town nearby. And he goes, 1 mile south of Dover Plains is a little settlement composed of two classes, males who don't do anything and females who raise children that take over the family business, meaning more people that don't do anything. And that was in 1908 in some little throwaway blurb in like the history of Dover. And so, like, that's what I mean. Like, they've been dug in. They've been living one way for a long time. The other reason they think they might call them onions or Oniontown is because the perception of people is that they don't bathe. And so they're just these smelly people without, I guess they have running water now, but running water and electricity are, like, not necessarily guaranteed. Like, those are things we take for granted here. They just don't really exist that like regularly in Oniontown. So we're talking like this is just how it is, and things just don't change. They got no street lights, no movie theaters, and then like I said, there's another that was from a quote: no street lights, no movie theaters, and people, not a lot of people with an 8th grade education.
I just don't understand how the people, whoever's in charge, the mayor of the greater county, doesn't like be like, hey, like let's fucking figure this place out.
How would you do that though? You can lead a horse to water type of situation. And it's not like that part of New York has just a lot of resources either. Like this is the Hudson River Valley, 1908 was probably a pretty nice area. Okay. It's not necessarily what it used to be. And have you ever driven through like those parts, like upstate New York, Western Pennsylvania?
I took a train through there once, but that's about it. It's
like I had to pull off the side of the road one time. I was driving through Pennsylvania like late at night. It's fucking scary. And that was like I stopped. It was like the first light I saw was a gas station. And I'm talking for like 50 miles. There's just like there's these parts of these Appalachian.
New York's so big.
New York, and people don't know that.
Yeah, it
takes like 8 hours to drive across New York. If you go,
big.
Yeah. So, so it's like people think New York City and everything outside of that is just. It's not like it's not like this great area anymore. So
I just don't know how. Like I said, if these kids are going to schools, like how is there not someone outside of there that they know that there's not more information? How is there not like, hey, friend of a friend, this guy broke off from Oniontown. He became friends with Johnny. Who was Johnny?
Yeah.
Who was like very successful and like shining. I don't know. I don't know. How there's not more of a trace.
I think that's how this guy from Vice got in. It was like a friend of a friend. So went to school with somebody who went to school with somebody who's like, hey, I'd like to talk to people about Oniontown and like tell their side of the story. And he shows up and it's like, hey, get the fuck out of here. Okay. Even though he came in like there's a right way to come in, and he said he interviews this guy he's like, why do you think outsiders like why do you think this is happening? It's like these bricks and the bricks and the rocks are going through people's car windows. They're trying to run people off the road. And he's like, hey, look it, like bricks and rocks that's fucking tame compared to what it was a generation ago. You used to come up here and you try to go up this dirt road, 30, 50 years ago. You're not met with bricks. You're met with shotguns and rifles. So like we've tamed a little bit. It's like, holy shit. Okay. So like from their eyes, it's like they are kind of getting better, I guess, but it's like it's dark, and it bums me out that places like that can exist in 2021 in America, and it does.
Yeah, because that's what, if you look at anything that you find online, if the people driving their cars down there, and there's videos of a kid and two girls, that's the one I watched, driving down there, and the fucking scariest part about driving down is it's a dead end.
Yeah.
So you're
no way out.
Yeah,
they
you're
have a fence over the front of it.
Yeah, you're just completely fucked when you get in there. So it is pretty ballsy driving in there. And you're right. Like this guy, then the kid was being an asshole. Like there's a difference between being, curious and being an asshole. Kid was being an asshole. He's honking the horn, stopping, and the fucking car pulls out, high speed chase, cuts him off. The kid gets out of it. Then throws a brick right through the kid's window. Yeah. Like, that's no joke.
Scary.
Like, they're fucking throwing shit at you if you come down that dirt road.
So now, imagine you're a parole officer. My sister, she was a family therapist, and she lived in North Carolina for a long time, and she would have to go into some of these places, these, like, trailer park type communities, and talk to people. Because, hey, like, you were arrested for this, you got a 7-year-old, like, we have to do state ordered therapy. It's not like a great situation, and that's she would feel threatened going into that place, and they didn't have necessarily the reputation of Oniontown. Can you imagine, like, some oh, I'm a parole officer, I'm a family therapist, and I'm not going in there. Like, you might not come out, so I'm not going in there. So it's hard to, like, figure out what is actually going on, which is why this. I would recommend this Peeling Oniontown article from 2012. It's a long article, but I would recommend that people read it, because it paints this town where you kind of get, like, their side of things, but it's also like, man, like, I can't believe people are living like that.
Dude, yeah. And I don't know, because I guess I just watched a pretty damn good true crime doc. It's called Murder in the Bayou. You heard about this?
No.
It's pretty damn good. It was on Amazon. It's on Showtime.
Okay.
Whatever. It's about eight girls were killed in this town in Louisiana, and, like, similar thing, like, they were involved in sex work, they were involved in drugs, but, like, they hung on the wrong side of town.
Yeah.
But I saw how, like, they were able to, and like, you see the videos of them going through those parts, and it was really bad.
Yeah.
But I saw that they were at least able to have some patrol, something there. So to think that there's this that exists, that's just a dirt road, that's a dead end, is fucking crazy.
Yeah. And and they talk about, even in some of those videos, you see the kids when they're driving through, it's like, oh, there's guys with chickens. It's like, yeah, like, they're living kind of a subsistence lifestyle where they're like, they have very little, access or ability to get food from the outside world. So they raise their own pigs, they raise their own chickens, and they try to just live on their own. And then, it doesn't seem like any way to live for you or I, but, like, at the same time, I have a problem with, like, that you did a great job of saying that there's a difference between curiosity and being an asshole. I feel like there was a stretch from 2008, 2009, 2010 where they were just a lot of assholes, like, pointing a finger at these people.
Yeah, man. I don't know.
I don't like that. But
no,
but I also don't like the way that they're living in there either.
Yeah.
So it's in that article, it's just like, yeah, like they had this guy from Vice, and the guy's, like, holding these two vacuums, like giant vacuum sealed bags of weed. He's like, that's a lot of weed. He goes, well, yeah, like, this is how we live. And he's like, the other guy down the street has, like, the same thing, but with meth. And it's just like they're just drug dealers, and, they hunt deer, so they'll, like, get in trouble, like, they'll hunt deer out of season, and you can get arrested for that. So it's just like all these things, just kind of like these myths and these stories kind of stack up on top of each other until you get this, holy shit, don't even go in there. And, like, so then no one goes in, no one goes out, and they've been living that way for 150 years or longer.
Would you drive down there?
Not at night. Would you?
I don't know, man. Even during the day, though, that, like, the video I just referenced to happen during the day. I don't know. It The dead end is what gets me.
Yeah. I mean, you're a curious guy. I'm a curious guy. I would, if we could set it up where we could say, hey, like we did this interview about, or podcast about you guys in Oniontown. We'd like to interview you for a follow-up. I would probably, if we set it up beforehand, I would probably take a drive in.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
If there's anyone out there who has a connection.
Clem.
Yeah, Clem said no way.
Okay, so Clem doesn't know any Oniontown people, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, it's sad. It genuinely bums me out.
Yeah. Oof, man.
It's a heavy one.
Yeah, dude. It's but it's also just such a mysterious one. Because maybe they're like perfectly content about what they're doing.
I suppose, but is that like an emperor has no clothes type of thing, where it's like they just don't even know the difference? Where it's, but it's like the difference is 100 miles away is New York City, 2 miles away is a real town, and they're just like, fuck that, like we're our own thing. And so then it's like you have a lot of accusations about people being like inbred and things like that, because if no one goes in and no one goes out, and it's the same group of a small group of people for 150 years or whatever, it's probably some of that going on.
Yeah.
So it's not good.
Well, all right. That's Oniontown, everybody. If you know any more information, I'd
Happy
be interested
Tuesday.
To hear. Yeah, happy Tuesday.
Yeah.
I'd definitely be interested to hear more information.
Me too.
If anybody's got it. Yeah. So thanks for listening. That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll see you then.